In 2018, a massive Russian nuclear submarine slipped out of port, crossed the Atlantic Ocean, and just disappeared. Not disappeared in the conventional sense, but disappeared as in NATO had no idea where it was. The entire alliance, with its vast network of underwater sensors, patrol aircraft, and dedicated hunter-killer submarines, lost track of a 13,800-ton nuclear vessel for weeks. When it finally reappeared, the incident quietly triggered alarm at the highest levels of Western Naval Command. That submarine was the Severodvinsk, the first of Russia's Yasen class, and the modernized version that followed it, the Yasen-M, is significantly quieter, more capable, and right now is sitting somewhere in the North Atlantic or under Arctic ice, carrying enough missiles to reduce entire cities to rubble within minutes. The uncomfortable truth that NATO's own wargames keep producing is that they can't reliably find it. And if they can't find it, they definitely can't stop what it's carrying. So, what's all the buzz behind this submarine? Let's find out. Chapter 1. How Russia Built a Ghost. To understand why the Yasen-M is such a serious problem for NATO, you need to appreciate how dramatic a departure it represents from everything Russia was building before it. For most of the post-Cold War period, the Russian Navy was in genuine decline. Funding collapsed after the Soviet Union dissolved. Shipyards deteriorated, and the submarines that remained operational were increasingly outdated and notoriously loud. Soviet-era boats like the Oscar II were powerful in terms of raw firepower, but acoustically detectable enough that NATO anti-submarine warfare assets had developed reliable methods for tracking and identifying them. The Cold War's underwater chess match had tilted decisively toward the West, and for about 2 decades it stayed that way. The Yasen program was supposed to change all of that, and the journey from concept to commissioned vessel is its own extraordinary story. The keel of the Severodvinsk was laid in 1993, the year the Soviet Union had been dead for 2 years and Russia was effectively broke. Construction continued in fits and starts for 20 years, interrupted repeatedly by funding crises, shifting requirements, and the sheer technical difficulty of what the Malakit Marine Engineering Bureau was attempting to build. The boat wasn't commissioned until 2013, making it one of the longest submarine construction periods in modern naval history. The modernized Yasen-M variant, the Kazan, the Novosibirsk, the Krasnoyarsk, the Arkhangelsk, followed with progressively faster build times as the Sevmash shipyard figured out how to standardize a production process for something this complex. What they eventually produced was an entirely different category of Russian submarine, and the 2018 Atlantic deployment proved it. Chapter 2. The Engineering of Silence. The reason the Severodvinsk could vanish in a NATO-monitored ocean comes down to some genuinely clever engineering decisions that address the specific weaknesses that had made Soviet submarines trackable for decades. Let's start with the reactor. The Yasen-M is powered by the KTP-6 pressurized water reactor, and its most important feature is something it doesn't have: main circulation pumps. Older reactor designs require these pumps to continuously circulate coolant through the core, and those pumps produce a distinct rhythmic acoustic signature, a narrow band noise that NATO acoustic analysts had spent decades cataloging and using to identify and track Soviet vessels. The KTP-6 uses natural circulation instead, relying on the density difference between hot and cool water to move coolant without mechanical assistance at low and medium power levels. Remove the pumps, remove the signature. It sounds simple. It took Russia decades to make it work reliably. The hull design adds another layer of concealment. Rather than the full double-hull construction used on older Soviet boats, which created significant hydrodynamic noise at speed, The Yasen-M uses a 1.5 hull configuration, where a light outer hull covers only portions of the inner pressure hull, combined with advanced anechoic coating tiles bonded to the exterior that absorb incoming sonar waves and dampen internal machinery vibration. The result is a vessel that can move at 20 to 28 knots in silent mode at acoustic performance levels that rival the U.S. Navy's Seawolf class and only marginally trail the Virginia class at higher speeds. And then there's the crew size, which tells its own story. The original Severodvinsk ran with 85 crew members. The Yasen-M variants operate with 64, a 25% reduction on the lead boat, and a 55% reduction compared to the Virginia class, which requires 145 personnel. That level of automation isn't just an operational convenience. Fewer people means less human noise inside the hull, a more compact internal arrangement, and a vessel that in some operational contexts functions more like an intelligent machine than a crude warship. Chapter 3. Eyes that see farther than ever. The stealth is what keeps the Yasen-M hidden. The sensor suite is what makes it lethal once it decides to act. The MGK-600 Irtish-Amphora sonar system is the most significant leap in Russian hydroacoustic capability in a generation, and its physical design required a trade-off that reveals exactly how seriously Russia prioritized detection capability over everything else. Traditional submarine sonar uses cylindrical arrays mounted in the upper bow with torpedo tubes positioned below. The Irtish-Amphora uses a massive spherical array that occupies the entire bow section, a configuration that provides dramatically greater surface area for hydrophone placement, far better passive detection range, and the ability to simultaneously track multiple targets across a much wider field of view. The problem is that a sphere large enough to be genuinely useful leaves no room for torpedo tubes in the nose. So the Yasen-M's torpedo tubes were moved to the midsection of the hull, mounted at an angled configuration, an arrangement borrowed from the U.S. Los Angeles class that keeps the bow clear for maximum sonar sensitivity, even at speed. Russia essentially looked at American submarine design choices from 30 years ago, understood why they were made, and applied the same logic to a system with a significantly larger and more capable sonar array. The practical result is a submarine that can detect NATO vessels at ranges previously only accessible to Western platforms. Add the flank arrays and towed array that complete a 360-degree acoustic picture, and the Yasen-M is hunting with senses that the Oscar II and Akula generations simply didn't have. Chapter 4. The arsenal that keeps NATO admirals up at night. Everything above makes the Yasen-M a formidable hunter-killer, but what makes it a genuine strategic threat is what's sitting in its 8 to 10 vertical launch system silos, each capable of housing 4 missiles for a total capacity of 32 to 40 rounds in a triple threat configuration that covers every mission profile from land attack to carrier killing to hypersonic strike. The Kaliber cruise missile handles the long-range land attack role, and its specifications are uncomfortable reading for European defense planners. The 3M14 land attack variant has a range of 1,500 to 2,500 kilometers, flying complex low-altitude terrain-following profiles to evade radar coverage. A Yasen-M sitting in the Barents Sea, never leaving Russian protected waters, never getting anywhere near NATO's patrol lines, can reach Berlin. It can reach London. The missile arrives without the submarine ever having been in danger. For anti-ship missions, the P-800 Onyx provides a supersonic capability at Mach 2.5 with a range of 300 to 600 kilometers. Using a high-altitude cruise phase, followed by a sea-skimming terminal approach, specifically designed to defeat carrier strike group air defenses through a combination of speed, low altitude, and coordinated saturation salvos. But the Zircon is the one that changed the conversation entirely. The 3M22 Zircon is a hypersonic cruise missile that operates on a scramjet engine and reaches speeds between Mach 8 and Mach 9, roughly 3,000 meters per second. At those speeds, the kinetic energy alone is sufficient to destroy most surface vessels, regardless of warhead effectiveness. More critically, the reaction time it leaves a NATO destroyer is not a tactical problem. It's a mathematical one. If a Zircon is detected at the radar horizon, approximately 30 to 40 kilometers for a low-altitude approach, the defending vessel has fewer than 15 seconds to identify the contact, classify it as a threat, develop a firing solution, and intercept a target performing high-G evasive maneuvers at 9 times the speed of sound. The U.S. Government Accountability Office has assessed that no existing countermeasures reliably defeat it. Russia began full integration of the Zircon onto Yasen-M vessels, including the Arkhangelsk and Kazan, in 2025. The integration is complete. The missiles are there. Chapter 5. The Caribbean Stunt and What It Was Really About. In June 2024, the Kazan led a Russian naval detachment to Havana, Cuba, the most significant Russian naval presence in the Caribbean in decades, arriving exactly 62 years after the Cuban Missile Crisis. The public reaction focused on the symbolism, which was deliberately provocative. The strategic reality was more specific. As the Kazan crossed the Atlantic, NATO scrambled an impressive surveillance operation to track it. USS Truxtun, USS Donald Cook, USS Delbert D. Black, the Canadian frigate HMCS Ville de Quebec, P-8A Poseidon Maritime Patrol aircraft, Canadian CP-140, Auroras operating in rotation overhead, the full weight of the Alliance's anti-submarine warfare capability focused on one vessel. They tracked it. But tracking a Yasen-M and stopping a Yasen-M are different propositions entirely, and the Kazan spent its Atlantic transit conducting what Russian sources described as high-precision missile weapons training, simulating strike missions against mock targets from a submarine that the world was watching and still couldn't intercept. The message wasn't subtle. Even under full surveillance, even shadowed by destroyers and overflown by patrol aircraft, a Yasen-M can transition from peaceful transit to missile launch in seconds. The visit to Havana was a demonstration of reach. The training en route was a demonstration of intent. The USS Helena, a Los Angeles-class fast-attack submarine, was quietly positioned at Guantanamo Bay as a countersignal. But Los Angeles-class boats are a generation behind the Yasen-M in acoustic performance, and everyone in the relevant naval commands understood what that positioning actually communicated about the current balance of undersea capability. Chapter 6. The Death of the GIUK Gap. For more than half a century, NATO's approach to containing Russian submarine activity in the Atlantic rested on geography. Any Russian submarine heading from its Arctic bases toward the open ocean had to pass through the Greenland-Iceland-United Kingdom gap, a choke point monitored by the SOSUS underwater sensor network and patrolled by maritime patrol aircraft operating from Iceland and Scotland. The strategy was called Gatekeeper, and for most of the Cold War it worked well enough that Soviet submarines knew they were being tracked the moment they attempted a breakout. The Yasen-M made the Gatekeeper strategy irrelevant, and it did so in the simplest possible way, by not needing to break out at all. With Caliber missiles that can strike targets 2,500 kilometers away, and Zircon missiles that can reach anything within a similar envelope at speeds no current defense can intercept, a Yasen-M operating in the Barents Sea, the heavily defended bastion zone covered by Russian air defenses and submarine hunting assets, can hold the entire European continent at risk without ever approaching the GIUK gap. The choke point that NATO spent billions to monitor and defend is no longer the choke point that matters. A 2025 wargame conducted by the Hudson Institute put numbers on exactly how serious this gap has become. The scenario simulated Russian submarines transiting from the Barents toward the Atlantic. Of 6 Russian submarines in the exercise, NATO forces successfully detected and engaged 2. 4 reached their target positions undetected. The teams that performed best were those equipped with large numbers of unmanned underwater hunting drones. assets that don't currently exist in NATO's operational inventory in anything approaching the required quantities. The wargame identified insufficient polar-capable surveillance assets and an outdated seabed sensor network as the primary failure drivers. Russia is aware of these gaps in extraordinary detail and has been exploiting them. Yasen-M submarines have been observed using the fjords of eastern Greenland and operating beneath Arctic sea ice as natural concealment, moving through areas where NATO's monitoring coverage is thinnest. The Arkhangelsk is based at Nerpicha, 60 kilometers from the Norwegian border, a NATO member state, allowing it to reach deep water patrol positions in the Norwegian Sea in minutes. From there, with its current weapons loadout, it can threaten targets across the entirety of Northern Europe. Chapter 7. The Fleet That's Still Growing. What makes all of this more pressing rather than less is that the Yasen-M program is nowhere near complete. As of early 2026, 5 Yasen-class submarines are operational. The Severodvinsk, Kazan, Novosibirsk, Krasnoyarsk, and Arkhangelsk. The Perm is in sea trials. The Ulyanovsk, Voronezh, and Vladivostok are under construction at Sevmash. Admiral Alexander Moiseyev has stated publicly that the Russian Navy's goal is a fleet of 12 Yasen and Yasen-M boats, replacing the entire remaining inventory of aging Akula, Sierra, and Oscar, 2 submarines with a unified, high-performance class operating across both the Northern and Pacific fleets. Each new hull represents years of accumulated construction knowledge at Sevmash, which has compressed build times from the 20-year nightmare of the Severodvinsk to approximately 7 to 10 years for serial production units. The fleet is getting larger, the build rate is improving, and the institutional knowledge for maintaining and operating these vessels is deepening with every deployment. In short, the Atlantic is no longer a NATO lake, and the alliance that spent the Cold War confident in its ability to find and track anything Russia put in the water is quietly, urgently, trying to figure out what comes next.